Okay, so now let's build some blocks. And so we're gonna think about how we would construct the abbey, and we want to choose these different architectural elements to highlight. So what we're going to be doing is really simple. We're going to be going over to this shape tool, and that's over here on the left. And if I click on it, I want to go up to rectangle tool. That might be defaulted on your interface. So it's shape tool on the left, and I know I'm sorry, it's so tiny. And then rectangle tool. All right, so I'm going to minimize this. And I'm going to go down here to my layers panel. I'm putting this here so that I can see it. And there's a plus button down at the very bottom. You'll see a small plus button. And I want to click this, and a new layer will show up. So I'm going to start off, if we remember from the PowerPoint, the various architectural elements, we're going to focus in on the buttress, the flying buttresses, the piers, and the pointed arch. And so those are, when I say these different things, that's what I'm referring to. Okay, so for the first one, I'm going to say right lower buttress. All right, so we have that selected, and now with the shape tool, the rectangle is selected, and I can choose a color that I want to fill it in. I'm just going to choose really basic primary colors. So I'm going to choose blue here. You can choose whatever you want. And I'm going to select this area right here. So, and again, we're thinking like building blocks. So I'm just going to make this square like this. And then on the layers panel, I'm going to go to opacity, and I'm going to make it 50% so that we can still see the building underneath. So now, instead of building this over and over again, I'm going to press return, and then I'm going to right click on this right lower buttress layer, and I'm going to choose duplicate layer. This screen should pop up, and I'm going to take away copy, and I'm going to say left lower. So now I have this here. I can go to my move tool, which is these pointed arrows. You can also press the key V, and I'm going to move it over here. If you see that these pink guidelines show up, this allows me to line things up really precisely. All right, so we have our first building blocks. Now let's do the same thing for the lower piers. These are these kind of thinner elements right through here. So again, I'm going to go to a new layer. I'm going to call this lower right pier. And we'll just keep that there. Okay, I'm going to choose a new color, back to that rectangle tool. And this time I'm going to choose purple. And I'm going to select up to this seam right here. All right, and I'm going to go back down to my 50% opacity. And I'm going to duplicate this. Okay, so now we are looking at our upper parts of the building. And with these, we want to think about creating some spaces for these, our building block of the flying buttresses to fit in. And so we're going to need to create these little notches within here. So that's an extra step with the rectangle tool. So let's start off by, let's do the upper right buttress. I'm going to choose a new color. And I want to select this area, and I want to make it a pretty similar width to my lower elements. So once you make that initial shape, you can adjust it from there. So I'm going to do something like this. And I'm going to reduce the opacity again to 50%. And now I want to add these notches. So I'm just going to use something really simple like the rectangular marquee tool. And I want to select an area. I pressed delete and the whole thing went away because I didn't deselect the shape. So I'm going to go to just choose any other layer, and I'm going to choose the upper right buttress again, and I'm going to press delete, and it says, oh no, you cannot complete your request because the content of the layer is not directly editable. What we need to do is to rasterize this, basically make it editable. So I'm going to go to my eraser tool, and anytime you have the marquee selection, the only thing we can affect is what is within these dots. So I click on that, and the reason why I did this extra step is to get this screen right here, and that says the shape layer must be rasterized before proceeding. Rasterize the shape? Yes, okay. Now I can just press delete, and that little chunk is gone. So I'm gonna go and kind of just find a space that's similar to what you can see with that arch and remove a little notch for the flying buttress. All right, so instead of just duplicating, we're gonna duplicate this layer, but we're also gonna do an extra step here. So I'm gonna go to duplicate layer, and I'm gonna choose upper left. I'm gonna press OK. And what I wanna do is I wanna go to Edit, Transform, and I wanna flip it horizontally. And that's gonna make an exact copy, but flipped for our left-hand side. I'm gonna go back to my Move tool, and looks like it's lined up there and also horizontally and vertically. And it looks like those notches work really well on this side as well. So I'm going to continue on with the upper pier and do the exact same thing. Okay, so we have a big chunk of our building built, and now it's time for the flying buttresses. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to choose lower right, and I'm just going to call it flying. And this one's a little bit trickier because it's at an angle. We're not just making a basic rectangle. And I'm going to choose the shape tool. I'm going to choose green. And I'm going to make a thinner, maybe longer rectangle like that. Now I want to go to Edit, and I'm going to go to Free Transform Path. And that allows me to move things around. And if I'm at a corner, you can see that my arrow turns into these, something that looks like a rotation. And I can kind of move things around until I get something that fits within both those notches. Okay, so I have this. I'm gonna go to 50% again. And now I'm going to duplicate this. I'm going to choose upper. I can just move it. And then just like before, we're going to duplicate and then flip horizontally. So we're starting to see this build up. Now it's time to make our arches. And the arches are a little bit more difficult because we need to create them from scratch. So we're going to create them from some circles. So I'm going to call this upper arch. And in the shape tool, I'm going to choose the ellipse tool. And I'm going to choose, let's see, I'll choose red. And now I want to create a circle that would hit on both sides of these piers. So big enough that it would, touch these areas. So I'm just going to create a circle. It's not perfect because now I can move it and I can shape it. What we're making here is the pointed arch, which is specific to Gothic architecture. And I'm going to make it just a little bit bigger than what we see. And I can make that opacity different so it's a little bit easier to visualize. If we wanted to get really specific with things, we could also notch out these areas on the lower pier. Okay, so I'm going to press return, and now I want to carve out this inner area. So I'm going to choose the elliptical marquee tool, and so I've made this selection, but it's not quite right. So now I can go to select in the menu panel and then go to transform selection. And that allows me to really think about how I want this to be. You could also do something like take it back into select and mask and be really, again, like really precise with your selection. But for time's sake, we're just gonna rough it. And that looks pretty good for the inside part. Maybe just a little bit more narrow. Okay, so I'm gonna press return, and you can see that selection. Now we'll go to that eraser tool again. Oh, we can't do it because it hasn't been rasterized. Please rasterize. And I'm gonna press delete. So now we have something that looks kind of like an arch, but has some weird extras. So I'm just gonna go back to my rectangular marquee tool and just get rid of those. And I like the rectangular marquee tool because I can get a really straight line. All right, so we have our first arch, and I'm probably going to be able to duplicate this layer. Okay, so we have our arches, and again, you could be much more precise about this in your selection. You can always transform it to make it a little bit bigger or more narrow, if that makes sense. And now I'm gonna choose to make the roof. And so we're gonna go, let me bring this down a little bit, to the shape tool once again and choose triangle. And I'm gonna choose a different color, maybe pink this time. And I just wanna make a triangle that would touch both of these sides. So all right. So you should have something like this. I just want to make sure everything is labeled really well. I'm going to label this roof. And so we have our building blocks of our image. The last thing I want to do is I want to create some layers of arrows so that I can animate those physical forces at play. For this, I'm going to need to go to the shape tool once again and choose custom shape. And then up here in that upper toolbar, you should see a shape pop up. It might be like a tree. So under arrows, we're going to just want to choose some kind of arrow. If you don't have the legacy shapes and more, you might need to go over here and if you go down here, you can go to this and you can either import shapes or you can go to the large, to look at these different lists, and it should show up. So I'm going to choose just a really basic arrow and make a new layer. And you can make as many arrows as you want. So we could think about gravity or these outside forces. We could also think about the pressure of the arch that's going to the right and left, going outward as well as down. And think about what color you want. I'm just gonna do black for now. And I'm gonna make this arrow. And same as before, I can do all these kind of rotations or transformations in terms of scale. And I can duplicate things. So I'm gonna duplicate layer. And think about how you might wanna label these. So I'm gonna call it arrow arch. So when that moved just now, that was because I didn't have the right layer selected. Okay, so I have this and I can rotate it. So I'm gonna go to File, Save As, and I'm gonna go up to here, Gothic. And what I was talking about before is that you can see Trinity Abbey Vendome blocks, and that is what we want to save as a Photoshop document.